I talked in one of my previous playlists videos about black magic and how sometimes we don't really know if you have no previous recollection of what the maladaptive ideas that sorcery brings into the world can kind of create. You're happy maybe to try it and just say, well, I mean, why not? I don't believe in God. I mean, there's all this suffering, so why not find a shortcut to maybe end my suffering? Not knowing that sorcery is actually a way that undermines a sense of security in the world is maybe something I want to talk about, just because it's something I've kind of experienced, and coming from um, a family that is quite enmeshed in folklore as it is, because it was a very, very primitive village that my dad came from. So I feel like I'm kind of hopefully phasing it out of the world. I hope so. Um, so anyway, there's this story of how uh, in I think it's the 18th chapter of the Quran. It's called the cave, where there's a person who's unknown to the world at the time of Moses, and the only way we find out about his story actually is that someone asked Moses, like, who's the most knowledgeable in the world? And Moses, knowing that he's a prophet and he has direct connection, or he can speak directly with God, he said it was me. But in spite of knowing that about himself and God allowing him that knowledge, God still wanted to teach him something about humility and humbleness with the information and the knowledge that you have. So it's almost to say, don't be so confident that you're the only chosen one in the world at a specific time. There could be several, and I don't have to tell you about all of them. Let's find out why. So when Moses replied, it must be me, like he just said, maybe like kind of like innocently, like it doesn't mean to be boastful, but it's just like I have all these miracles. I know that I'm sent to kind of help people find a new way of existing in the world so that they're having an easy life. Um, God ends up showing him uh, or inspiring him to find somebody who is called Al-Khidhr. So we don't know, it's something akin to the Buddha. We don't know if he has a soul or if it's just time. And it's just something that exists with, because we know that the archangel, his spirit exists in the world. We don't really know how. And maybe that's what it is. It's just like there's this like if you think of Christianity and the Trinity, it's really difficult to construct what these constructs are in any kind of language. So we kind of just leave it. I like to leave them vague and just let people imagine um, ideas, and then hopefully they'll be inspired in a way that kind of is meaningful for them. So anyway, he ends up finding this man, and he says, I want to follow you to find out what you've been taught, because I've been inspired that you are a learned person. So the Khidr replies and he says, no, you're not going to be patient enough to walk with me and learn. So Moses says, no, 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 just try me. So there are three different scenarios where this man, he does something that looks like it's evil. And Moses, he was known to have a very quick temper. So he was very impatient because he's already living in a society where there's so much oppression. So seeing this was just like, he couldn't fathom. He's like, what? So he lost it. He just got really upset. He's like, why would you, the first, I'm not going to tell you the scenario so that you can read it and kind of figure out for yourself what conclusions you want to draw. But anyway, the second story, or the second kind of occurrence that happened, was that he saw a little boy and he killed him. So to anybody, it would be like, why would, so then the man, he continued, he didn't tell him. And then they went to a third scenario, and then they did something. And I believe they almost helped create something that would be safe for the future. So it's almost kind of like creating a healthy environment in the future, but it wasn't anything that would be recognized as such for that specific time. So Moses asked, well, why didn't you ask to be paid for that? And that was the end. That was where the Khidr said, you know what, the first time I said, okay, I'll give you another chance. The second time I was like, I don't know. And this third time I was like, nope, that's enough. Like, you're not going to be able to continue with me. So I think this is where we have to part ways. Now, the third scenario, you can understand where it's kind of perplexing. Like, I don't know, like you helped somewhere in a city. Like, why not ask to have some kind of acknowledgement or some kind of compensation for your efforts? But anyway, the point that I'm trying to kind of focus on is the one where a boy was killed. And so if you think, why is it that sometimes parents don't have a child, or what is it that sometimes becomes really difficult for children and parents? Like, what are some of the conflicts? Sometimes you have kids who have families that um, the families are very, very traditional in a way that makes it very, very difficult for them to think of the ways that are kind of popular in the society in the contemporary context. So it makes it very difficult for the children to almost know how to negotiate. So they're almost stuck, and they just get angry, and then the parents get angry, and then they have no way of communicating with each other, and sometimes um, it ends up hurting both, like the parents and the kids, and there's no way of understanding how to kind of problem solve. So because God knew that there was going to be in the future, there's going to be a scenario where this child is going to actually do something that's going to really, really hurt and upset the parents. And these parents are really actually really kind parents. Like, they're known as people who are trying their best to understand the universe already. So if they're trying their best, it's almost like they already have that little glow of a candle. And if they are asking God for this baby, and then this baby grows up and does something that really, really hurts the universe in some way, that could actually blow out the flame of faith that they have, because they're just like, we're working really hard. Why? And maybe they won't have the understanding at that time enough about the universe and technology and how time and destiny, the way they align and kind of misalign somehow. They maybe wouldn't have the information to kind of be inspired yet. So the knowledge isn't ready for that time for them to be able to maybe conclude and resolve within themselves why their son did this. So instead, God took away his life. So it's almost like you get to sleep for a little bit, and maybe you'll wake up in the future. So this is what we find in the explanation later on. The prophet, in his time when he's kind of getting inspired, he was explaining to his friends, his companions, this is what had happened like a long time ago in the time of Moses. So in a way, it's almost to say, so what is a reward? Like, people sometimes talk about the hereafter, like the next life, or like the day of judgment, or once you're reborn, you have like a better life, or you don't have a good life, depending on what you've chosen to do in your actual lifespan, for example, like right now. So let's pretend I'm somebody who is trying my best to understand the universe, and I'm trying to do it in a way that's ethical, which means I'm not trying to hurt myself or anybody. And I'm not trying to take shortcuts. So sometimes taking shortcuts means I'm not learning something enough to know how to do it correctly. And in doing that, I do something really, really wrong, and I could hurt somebody in a really bad way, or myself in a really bad way. So imagine now that you're that good person, okay? And I'm the person who, I don't know anything about the universe. And I'm watching you, and I'm just like, I wonder, I really want to be good like you. Like, you have so many friends, you're really good at school, and you don't even mind if you get a bad grade, even though you get a lot of good grades. Like, what is that? And so I decide, well, I'm gonna find out. And I don't know that you believe in God, for example, because I can't tell. Like, you kind of just like everybody else. So I start reading about these big spirits that exist in the world. And sometimes if you think about Halloween, I think these are stories that are meant to kind of be almost scary, to help us make these actual scary ideas in the world less scary, but almost in a way that's kind of like in Aladdin, where it's in a way to teach us that these things exist in the world, but you have to be careful with them. So they make it kind of playful so that we don't actually have nightmares, but we also understand that God loves us, and he wants us to learn these things from the past to bring them to the future, and understand how we can make something that looked scary kind of easy to understand and then stay away from, and almost kind of make it like dramatic play and just costumes and fun. So imagine I actually believe in witches, and I believe that I can cast a spell, and I want to, because I'm like, I want to be good like you. And I don't understand that I actually just have, all I have to do is just ask. I just have to in my heart to say, I hope I can be like someone who knows how to make friends and knows how to understand the universe. I just want a shortcut, and that's all I want to do. So what if in doing that, I somehow get you in trouble? Can you imagine that would happen? Like, you in your mind, you'd be like, that's not fair. I'm doing all the work. Like, I'm trying my best, and she's not even doing anything. But then you think how God sometimes wants you to be the pioneer, right? And it's such a big job to have that courage to say, I didn't really do anything wrong. Why am I getting in trouble? But it's almost because I already have an ethical understanding of the world that you're not going to actually want to hurt me. You're almost going to say, oh, maybe this person wants to know something about me, but they don't know how to ask. And God's letting me kind of show, or like talk about maybe why her choice or his choice wasn't a good one. So in that way, it almost sounds like your spirit, like think about the archangel, he's a messenger spirit, or Gabriel. So what if he decides when you're sleeping, he decides, I'm going to let you sleep and I'm going to hold your soul, but I'm going to try to let you experiment with this other soul that's having trouble and it has a really big question, and you're the only soul that can help it. So if you think about it, it's almost like the story of Musa, like Moses and Al-Khidhr. It's almost like there's something missing in the world. Somebody has a really, really important question. They don't know how to find the resources to help them, but they're asking God, and God decides, well, because you have freedom of choice and free will, and you tried something that's putting the effort. You didn't know that there was a better choice, but because you got it kind of wrong, God's allowing you to try to figure out a way to make it right. So let's say in doing that, you decide, like I explained, sometimes you wake up and nothing makes sense in your life anymore, and you're just like, everything was going fun, and all of a sudden, like, nothing at school makes sense, and then maybe there's problems in my family now, and we end up having to move, and now I have new neighbors and I can't get along with my friends, and all these troubles start to happen in your life, and you're like, what on earth? But to you, you're just like, it's okay, like I'm gonna keep trying my best because I know that change happens and I have to adapt and I have to learn how to problem solve, and then maybe let myself be sad and then help myself get back up again. Now, this spirit, that the archangel, it starts to kind of move around in the world and try to help people understand why bad choices are not always good ones. But think about it now, because now that's almost a soul that you were trying to create healthy ideas with. And now it's sharing with the world without you do the work, really. You're almost building more work. So it's almost like if you think about like a little bit of light, that little candle, and then think about it lighting up. If you watch Inside Out, you think of that, the core memories, how they all connect in the brain. It's almost like that. Like if you have an idea in your heart and then somebody decides, I want to think like you, it's almost like they connect to your heart, and your heart almost moves different ideas, and then angels move inspiration through other people, and it all sort of goes around in like this big network of ideas. And in the end, we're almost sort of balanced in a way. So if you think about people who understand something and they think it's really important to share, you don't actually have to go and teach it in a way and try to force people to do it. You just have to just be yourself, and then you'll notice that people will almost wonder, and they'll be able to do things wrong the way you did things wrong, and then learn from it the way you learned from it. And in that way, you understand how God sustains the world and the universe, and allows us to remember that freedom of choice is important for everybody in the same way, even if they're doing something wrong, right? And then he has warnings in the Quran. It's called warnings, like, I'm telling you all the things that the previous generations before the prophet used to do, so that you can look for things like ideas in your mind that come to you. Look for them in the Quran and see like what happened when people chose to do this. For example, like if they chose to move to a country where people were really, really, really sick, are they allowed to move there? And the answer would be, well, I mean, think about it. If you're trying to travel because you want to go see the pyramids, for example, in Egypt, but you know that in that city right now, it's very, very polluted, right? And you have asthma. It's not going to make sense, because asthma means you have a really hard time breathing, and maybe you can take your puffers with you, but why do that? Like, why not just wait for a little bit, or just watch pictures, or like look at pictures, or watch videos about it, because you don't need to really hurt your health. So it's things like this where you have to, going back to Jeremy Bentham, you almost have to always remember, if I'm almost balanced in what's good and what's bad, when I think about two choices, and they both almost look like they're not either wrong or right or right, they're kind of like almost neutral, like it's hard to decide which way to go. It's good to just ask God that. Just say, God, I'm choosing between two kind of almost similar choices, and I don't know which one. Can you help me choose one? And then if you just go on your day and maybe dream about it or think about it, you'll find that one choice will usually kind of close up and one will kind of open up. And that almost helps you see that there's one choice that is actually going to be a better choice for you. So I wanted to talk about this because we don't really understand sometimes how our body contains a spirit. And it's something I'm coming back to, because I think it's something that people almost can't get beyond when they're thinking about religion. And they almost have to get that sort of hurdle resolved before they start to think about other things in the universe. So it could be something that you revisit as you're studying and as you're living through your life, but it doesn't have to be something that you resolve right away. You can continue to move on, because as you learn new things, you'll be able to come back and almost add to that foundation in new ways. And I continue to do this every day. Like, I've been studying this for, I don't know, I've been thinking about like God and the spirit since I was probably 4 years old, right? Just because my mom, she She loved to recite Quran, and she would help us understand how to recite it from memory. So it's just something that my heart and my mind are just really used to, and it kind of brings me comfort the way nursery rhymes do. So knowing this, it almost helps you understand why um, like we shouldn't have these ideas or these vibes that almost make us envious. I talked a little bit about that. And jealous. It's almost like if somebody has something that you're interested in or that you want to kind of learn about, it's good to just ask about it and be inspired rather than find it in another person, because that other person is actually built in a way that whatever they have, that talent is actually specific for them. They already know in their mind and in their heart how to use it, right? For you, you don't know what that is. And God doesn't necessarily want you to be exactly the same, because he's like, you already have something inside of you that you have to figure out what that is. So you kind of have to kind of dig inside and figure out what you want to be inspired about, and then you'll be inspired. So just something to think about, kind of like a form of understanding spirits that involves a little bit of popular culture, because I know sometimes when people think about celebrations, Halloween is the first one usually to kind of fall off the list. And to me, it's really sad, because it's almost like the body of what we know is, it's like this mythology about malevolence and like divine will in the world, because we've got the angels, we've got um, like the skeletons, like the cycle of life and rebirth, and then the pumpkin, which we know of the story of Jonah, which is sometimes we make mistakes, but God covers us. So these really, really wonderful stories that have lovely kind of morals that we can kind of learn from. So try not to be dismissive of any kind of particular way of thinking, but try to understand how through time we've evolved with them and kind of made them something that's almost palatable.